What's up, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I am here to talk to you about the final storyline in Joss Whedon and John Cassaday's Astonishing X-Men run. This collects issues 19 through 24 and the giant size issue of Astonishing X-Men. And I had said when I first started reviewing this series that this run starts off really fantastic and with each arc gets worse. And up until now, that pattern has been holding true. And I remember once upon a time thinking that that pattern did hold true, but reading this arc, I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I did the last time that I read it. Now, it's not a perfect arc. I still think that the first arc of this series, the Cure storyline, is the best one of this run. I think this arc might be about on par with the Danger Room storyline. I think the Danger Room storyline might be better from a narrative standpoint. I had some issues with that. You can go watch my video on that if you want to. But I think what really made me enjoy this storyline so much was it's the X-Men in space. I've always had a soft spot for any time the X-Men are in space, and I know there's people out there who can't stand it when the X-Men are in space. But personally, I always enjoy it when they're in space. Now, I wouldn't want to see the X-Men in space for a very extended period of time, but for 5 or 6 issues, I don't mind them being in space. And so that definitely was a point in this storyline's favor. And also, I was kind of impressed with how well Whedon and Cassaday were able to pick up most of the dropped subplots from the series and weave them together in this final volume. We have the return of the Sentinel that the Danger Room brought back to life in the second storyline. I had completely forgotten that that thing was still hanging around out in outer space. Whenever I read the Danger Room storyline, I had actually was thinking to myself, hey, do we ever see that Sentinel again? Yes, we do. It shows up in this storyline in kind of a minor role. We also get the Danger Room playing more of a part in this storyline than I thought she did. For some reason, when I was reading the Danger Room storyline a few weeks ago, I was thinking that Mike Carey was the one who kind of took that character and made it turn into more of an ally to the X-Men during his X-Men Legacy run post-Messiah Complex. And no, the Danger Room being an ally to the X-Men, that is seated in this series. Now, I will go ahead and say there is one potential drop subplot concerning the Danger Room. Emma Frost basically lies to the Danger Room and says, if you help us save the Earth, I will give you Charles Xavier. That never happens. I don't think that that was even referenced whenever Carey brought the Danger character back into the X-Men in his run. But that was a minor little problem. You could say that that is a drop subplot. Speaking of drop subplots, at the end of the Hellfire Club storyline, where we get to see Cassandra Nova seemingly transferring her consciousness into armor, that never comes up again in this storyline. At one point, the dragon creature that is telepathic, that works for Agent Brand, it says something about Emma Frost's head is empty. There is no Cassandra Nova entity in her head. That is the last that we even hear of Cassandra Nova for, I think, a very long time. Outside of, like, flashbacks and stuff like that, like in Mike Carey's X-Men Legacy run, I don't think that Cassandra Nova has made any more appearances in the X-Men world after the Hellfire Club storyline. And I'm still, after reading that storyline a couple weeks ago, I'm still not sure if that was all in Emma's head or if that was actually Emma Frost, like, messing with the X-Men, trying to be freed. I have no idea. That's probably the weakest part of this entire run, is the Hellfire Club storyline. But this run culminates in Kitty Pryde being inside a giant bullet that is 10 miles long, and it is made of this metal that Kitty Pryde has had trouble phasing through pretty much since she found Colossus in the first arc. And this bullet is facing towards Earth, and then she basically phases the bullet through the entire planet, and then she's stuck on the bullet, and that's how the series ends. And then this prophecy that Colossus was meant to destroy the entire break world, it turns out that that was generated by this other lady who lives on the break world, and at first she seems to be an ally of the X-Men, but then we find out that she is completely 100% bonkers, and she wants to destroy the break world because she feels sorry for the people who live on the break world. She thinks that because these people who live there are in pain and their suffering needs to end, so she needs to find someone out there who is capable of destroying this giant nuclear reactor so that the entire planet will be destroyed. And the only person who's capable of doing that and surviving is Colossus. And so she goes through a series of steps trying to maneuver Colossus into such a way where he can do that. It's really weird because on the break world, there's two people who are both kind of vying for power of the entire break world. There's Warlord Krun, or Kroon, and he actually comes back in in Kieran Gillen's Uncanny X-Men run, and then you have Agane, who is the one who is trying to maneuver Colossus into destroying the Break World. And Agane somehow, I guess, was able to manipulate Ord into going to Earth and bringing Colossus back to life. Even though we were led to believe pretty heavily that Ord was not having his strings pulled. He went to Earth, and the only reason he brought Colossus back to life was to test the mutant cure stuff on his genetic samples. They didn't really give any indication that Ord was in any way working with Agane. In fact, if he was working with anyone at all, it would have been with Warlord Kroon. And so Agane acts like she's been the big puppet master behind this entire run of events that led Colossus to the Break World, when in reality that doesn't make any sense at all. That's a huge plot problem where she acts like she has been the reason that everything that's happened to Colossus in this run has happened, when that just doesn't make any sense if you sit down and think about it. Also, let's go ahead and talk about Kitty Pryde being stranded in the big 10-mile bullet that's facing towards Earth. Number one, a giant bullet that is 10 miles long, that is just stupid. Okay, I understand that comic books have their root in silly, stupid things. Things like in the 1950s and 60s, human beings having their minds transferred with the mind of a gorilla, and hilarity ensues. I understand that. But I feel like there's a time and place for silly, stupid things being used to their best effect in comic books. And this run, while it has had some silly moments, most of the time those moments have come organically from the characters. Most of the time we've had comical lines coming from the characters themselves, things that they say. But we didn't have really stupid stuff actually happening outside of the characters and what they were saying. This whole thing about a big 10-mile long bullet, it's physically dumb. It's almost borderline slapstick. And Whedon is acting like this is this really big epic thing that ends his run, when in reality, it's just really stupid. And I think I may be one of the only ones who believes that. I've never really run into anyone who just absolutely hated that it was a giant bullet facing the planet. I feel like it would have been perfectly fine if it had been a giant nuclear bomb that was going to destroy the whole planet, or a laser beam or something like that. But Whedon needed a really dumb device so that he could get Kitty Pryde off of Earth. Basically, I feel like because Whedon got attached to the character of Kitty Pryde, and he didn't want anyone else writing her. So even though basically nobody was using Kitty before Astonishing X-Men was going on, she was occasionally showing up in Claremont's Extreme X-Men run, where she had made it pretty clear that she wanted to retire from the X-Men and she wanted to be a college student. And then in this run, there's absolutely no indication that she was in college or wanted to be a college student. So it's not like Whedon was in any danger of losing his favorite character to someone else writing her badly, because Kitty Pryde basically had retired, and if Whedon hadn't brought her back, it's a very good possibility that she wouldn't have been in the X-Men for a while. Now, it's very probable that someone would have brought her back eventually, but she was more or less gone, and then Whedon brought her back, and then had her in the series for this entire run, and then it's almost like he felt vindictive, like, I don't want anyone else touching my favorite character, so instead of leaving that character in the sandbox, I'm going to take her with me, and nobody else can touch her. That's how this scene feels, and that's just really petty and childish on Whedon's part. And I feel okay in saying that because Whedon, a lot of times, is very petty and childish. He may be a really fantastic writer, but he is not without his faults, and pettiness and childishness are both definitely among those. All you have to do is Google Joss Whedon, and you could throw a rock on the internet, and you could hit one of the instances where he acts like one of those things. And this whole instance of Kitty being stranded on the bullet really far away, it's just bad writing. It just comes from a really mean-spirited writer who doesn't want anyone else touching this character, and then whenever Matt Fraction eventually brought her back to Earth, that was equally stupid, but it was a stupid thing that they were trying to do to undo a stupid thing, and I just felt like the whole thing was one big huge mess. But I'll talk about that if I ever get around to talking about Matt Fraction's X-Men run. So basically, as far as this entire run, I really love the first arc. I think that this arc and the second arc were pretty neck and neck. I think the second one was written a little better, but I think this one was maybe a little bit more enjoyable because it's the X-Men out in outer space fighting bad alien creatures. But I feel like the third arc is the absolute worst one, definitely. But this arc, it's not as good as a lot of people let on. I remember when this run ended. Well, I remember when this run ended, a lot of people were disappointed because it took these guys so long to do what really shouldn't have taken them that long. And I talked a little bit about that when I reviewed the first arc, the Cure storyline. A lot of people, as this series went on, it's like, man, they're taking a really long time to tell what basically amounted to 2 years of stories, but it took them 4 years to do it. And I think a lot of people, when this series was all said and done, they were like, wow, that was kind of disappointing in the end. But I think that this arc it was a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, I feel like this entire run was not quite as epic as you might think it would have been if you read the first storyline. And it's maybe I'm being a little unfair, but I did enjoy this last arc, but I don't feel like it is as good as the first two storylines, even though I probably enjoyed this one a lot more than the second storyline. So those are my thoughts on the final volume of Joss Whedon and John Cassaday's Astonishing X-Men run. I'm not really sure what X-Men thing I'm going to be reviewing next week. I'll think of something, and you'll see it whenever I get it up. But those are my thoughts on Whedon and Cassaday's Astonishing X-Men run. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back later in the week with some other videos. Have a great rest of the day. I'll catch you later.